So NC State's been busy. I think at least three, maybe a fourth. If it's not official yet, it probably will be soon. Have come out of the portal to join the Wolfpack. Let's start with the point guard from Michigan State, Trey Holloway, who is a really good player. Look, the Spartans ended up in the Elite Eight before losing to Auburn. How dynamic is he? I would imagine he's going to be a day one starter for Will Wade.
Yeah, a lot of experience. I mean, already over 100 career games, a lot of playing time in a good program and in a good conference in the Big Ten. And, it was sort of, I think, kind of interestingly this season at Michigan State, part of like a really talented kind of collective backcourt with Jeremy Fears, Jaden Akins, and then obviously Jace Richardson, who's projected to be a lottery pick in the draft here. So I think Richardson was certainly the biggest driver of scoring offense in the backcourt, and after that was probably Fears. But Hallman fit nicely in, and I think right now on paper, State is set up to have a lot of other talented backcourts, talented guards in the backcourt. So having a guy like Hallman that gives you some shooting, gives you some pull-up shooting, can run a pick and roll, lots of paint assists, and sort of like working within a collective is a really nice pickup. So it's been a busy offseason, obviously, for the Pack, and Hallman, I think, is I would sort of like stop short of like I wouldn't say like a future star for the Pack, but certainly like at the least a rotation piece and likely a starter and a guy that plays a lot of big leverage minutes for them next season.
All right, the two guys that the Wolfpack brought from McNeil State to join their former head coach, now they're still head coach, Kadir Copeland, Alan Breed. How do these guys fit in? And then we'll talk about we'll do one bit on a returner with Paul McNeil coming back. But what can you tell us about Kadir Copeland and Alan Breed?
Yeah, starting with Breed, I think just another guy that gets a lot of steals. Unfortunately didn't get to play much at McNeil State last season before suffering a season-ending injury in November, but played a lot previously at Providence, so an older guard with lots of experience, creates steals. We probably talked about that with regards to Wade's defense, and gives them another guy, kind of like Holloman, that can, score off the pick and roll, score out isolation, some of the, shot making, kind of off the dribble components. And then Copeland, I mean, I'm sure plenty of people here, remember him from his time at Syracuse a couple of years ago.
Right.
But super creative player, kind of weird, like 6'6" point guard that doesn't really shoot. But he's sees the floor incredibly well, can really leverage his size and strength to score and to pass. Very good open floor playmaker. I've gone back and watched a fair amount of, McNeil State film from this season, and he's someone that certainly, stood out as kind of like the most important piece of their transition offense, and a guy that they still found ways to make a pretty important engine of their half-court offense, too. So Copeland's the guy that I think, not a great shooter up to this point of his career, but creates a lot of turnovers, can rebound for a guard, and is sort of just like a fire starter in transition. Plus, given how much, Will Wade's going to want to switch 1 through 5, it's important to have guys like Copeland that are, 6'6" and long and, active hands at the guard positions that can slide around and guard different positions. So makes a lot of sense. And certainly someone that can, I think, kind of get any team he's on going, just with his ability to hit ahead and pass, kind of, in a way, kind of like what Michael O'Connell did for State the last couple of years, like that kind of passing. But I think Copeland more explosive as a downhill driver in the half court too, with more size, so that sort of makes him, kind of like a bigger weapon in the half court.
Brian Geisinger, 24/7 Sports, and, of course, Split the Action on Substack, joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. He is a basketball brain. So Paul McNeil, he announced he was staying. Trey Parker, you can understand, it's kind of redundancy at that position. Trey Parker is going to move on, even though I think one of the best performances, if not the best performance I saw all year, was Trey Parker at Cameron Indoor Stadium against Duke. How does Paul McNeil fit? Is he going to be the featured piece in the backcourt? Is he just one of many options?
I think he's going to be one of many, just because if you watching McNeese, like it sort of was a collection of guys that really kind of shared the ball from like a playmaking standpoint. But of course, if you go back to Will Wade at LSU, you're seeing teams with Javonte Smart and Cam Thomas where they were maybe not quite heliocentric, but a little bit more on the ball. I think a guy like McNeil kind of fits in different ways. One, because he's such a talent, so there is this like upside, component. But a lot of the guys we just talked about, Copeland, Breed, Holloman, these are guys that I think can play on and off the ball too. But just when I close my eyes and think about how they play, a lot of it is them on the ball. And so to have a guy like McNeil that can run around screens, that can spot up and relocate, like you need some shooting to kind of make all of this actually kind of like meld together. And McNeil's a guy with big time range. I wrote a big piece, published it over the weekend at my Substack page on McNeil.
Yep.
There's a lot of intriguing stuff, like sneaky good offensive rebounder, pretty good connective passer, and one of those guys where you can't draw too many conclusions because he played basically 200 minutes this past season, so not much, but just he was a real impact, like from an on-off plus-minus standpoint, with not only with State's overall point differential, but in terms of how much better guys, pretty much everyone outside of Jaden Taylor was more efficient offensively with McNeil on the court. Again, with small samples here, so you can't put too much into it, but I think that does speak to the connective playmaking and the shooting that McNeil brings. And I'm just hoping with a larger runway to work with and a little bit more confidence that McNeil's the guy that could maybe go up a level or two for State next season.
Brian Geisinger is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. All right, one more thing, and this pertains to State. I think most people believe that Mackenzie Mbako is going to be here. I don't know if I said his last name right. And I was trying to remember, where do I recognize that name? And then he was supposed to go to Duke, but when Kyle Filipowski came back, he decided to leave. He went or decommit. He ended up at Indiana, and now he is back in the portal. And I think NC State are the favorites if it's not official. Power forward who can step outside. This much I know. What else can you tell us about him? And do you think ultimately his destination will be Raleigh?
Yeah, I mean, it was real late. If you remember, 2 years ago, it was real late in the process when he decommitted too. Like he played at the Hoop Summit in Portland that year in 2023, I believe, still as like a Duke commit.
Yeah,
if memory serves me correctly. And then when Flip and Mark Mitchell said they were coming back, and there were maybe a few other things at play, but he ultimately ends up at IU, and I think was like good, but maybe not quite maybe fell a little sort of short of where you would expect the 5-star kind of billing to be. And I think that's kind of a guy that makes a lot of sense for Will Wade to kind of try to like tap into that upside and try to get some stuff out of it. I think if you go back and look at some of the players that Will Wade has had at both LSU and McNeese State, Tari Eason, Brandon Murray, some of these sort of like hybrid forward wings that give you a lot of positional versatility, can really move around the floor, guard different positions, do a lot of different things, and just sort of like give you different kinds of lineup flexibility with their, again, switch everything, can work into the press, athletes, and guys that you could play at the 3, play at the 4, so go small, go big, like do different things. And I think a guy like Bacco is someone that certainly like fits nicely into that archetype.
All right, I want to go through a couple of these Carolina guys quickly, and then I want to ask you about 2 other players who are at least there's rumors about. We saw Henry Visar from Arizona, who I think still has 2 more years of eligibility left. He's coming to Carolina. I mean, that guy was super impressive in the game against Duke. 7'2", seems to have a decent level of athleticism. Touch, can shoot free throws. But the guy is obviously a great player. But let me ask you about Kian Evans from Colorado State, a guard. How does he fit into what Carolina wants to do?
Yeah, I like Evans a lot. I mean, first off, like I think Hubert Davis and his staff have done a nice job in the portal. But to get a guy that has the shooting ability of Evans, I think is a real big one. And there's a lot of data at this point that suggests that Evans is, probably one of the better shooters in the country last season, was certainly one of the better shooters, if not maybe the best shooter, in the Mountain West Conference last season. But the three-point shooting ability off the catch,
Yep.
off the dribble, thinking about all the ways they featured R.J. Davis under Hubert the last 4 years. I mean, I feel like Evans is sort of like plug and play in that regard. Decent size at the guard position too. You mentioned Vesar. I think Vesar's a pro. I think he's actually someone that probably should be testing the draft waters. But 7-footer that moves like that. He, over the course of the season, started to shoot the ball a little bit, has some stretch potential too. So to have a guy like that you can pair up in the pick and roll with Evans, and he's a guy that can roll, he can slip, he can pop. I wouldn't say he's quite a hub, but you can definitely throw it to him in the middle of the floor with different 5-out looks or playing to the elbow. So I just think that as a pick and roll, pick and pop battery at the 1 and 5 is kind of excellent, and you can just kind of piece things in, And I also think a guy like Vesar and Evans really help with the fit of someone like Seth Trimble, right?
Right.
You and I talked about Trimble a lot. Hopefully he goes up a level as a catch and shoot 3-point guy this offseason. But having shooters, especially in that front court position with Vesar, and he's not at this point he's not a high volume stretch 5, but can give you some of that. He'll probably dabble with that even more next season. But someone who could also open the floor. And so you can just envision, pick and pop with Evans and Vesar and Trimble's cutting on the weak side, and just how all the things that can open up for you can open up in the half court. So I've really liked what UNC has done so far. And honestly, bringing Jaron Stevenson back home to Orange County.
Yeah, that's right.
Seems like a no-brainer, but kind of what we were just talking about with Mbacco at potentially at State, but just a versatile, multi-positional guy. Could play the 3 and the 4 at Alabama at 6'11", has flirted with the 3, rangy, can just do a lot of stuff. So kind of a lot of untapped potential, I would say, with Stevenson, who just kind of got buried in a very deep front court this season at Alabama.
All right, final thing. I got about 60 seconds for Brian Geisinger. We'll just go to Xavier Lee, the guard from Princeton, who might be the most sought after. I don't know if he's the most sought after player in the transfer portal now. What do you like about him?
A lot. I mean, really, really creative with the basketball. Can really, really, really pass the ball to sort of all court, vision, playmaking, has the off dribble shooting and creation. To punish teams, can attack different kinds of coverages. If he's seeing drop, he's got the pull-up shooting ability. I think as far as Lee and Duke go potentially as a pairing, I think it makes a lot of sense. It just kind of depends on who hypothetically is coming. Not hypothetically, the hypothetical fit of Lee and Duke really is going to depend on who's coming back for the Blue Devils potentially at those guard positions. So. I think, but he makes a lot of sense, as a guy that both parties, would be interested in a potential hookup.
I mean, he looks like a dynamite player. It only begs the question, why was he at Princeton? Not that Princeton doesn't have good basketball players. Brian Geisinger, 24/7 Sports, split the action on Substack. All right, sir, there'll be more. I'll talk to you very soon.
Yep, sounds good.